All right, folks, it's 7 o'clock. Welcome to the July 13th meeting of the North Texas Archaeological Society. I've got a few business items to go through, and then we'll get to our speaker, Bill Moore. Okay, some general announcements before we get to our speaker. The first is we had a huge membership increase since our May meeting. We welcomed 35 new members during that period of time. So if you're in the room or if you're on Zoom joining us, thank you very much. And some of these folks I know helped us out at the DAS Kids Camp, which was a wonderful success. This is a reminder that we provide free NTAS memberships for students. It's the NTAS sponsored student membership. Please see our scholarship page if you're a student and would like to have a sponsored membership. Additional general announcements. Thank you to our NTAS donors. We had a couple during the period between our last meeting and this meeting. Those donations in part help us award scholarships. We were able to award 7 scholarships for the TAS Field School this year, which is really wonderful. I know these folks had a good time going, and we're very proud to have been able to sponsor their attendance. Another reminder that NTAS scholarships are now available to anyone for all TAS academies, the Field School, and the upcoming annual meeting. Non-TAS members may apply, and if they receive a scholarship, they will also receive a free membership to NTAS. Our August 2023 guest speaker is going to be Gus Costa, who will be presenting on geoarchaeological studies in Southeast Texas. You guys are going to get tired of hearing me say this, but it is pinch pot kit making season. Okay. I know I've sent out at least 5 emails about it already, and I will keep sending them out until we have some volunteers. Please contact Molly Hall if you're interested in hosting a session in the western part of DFW. We already have a session planned for at the Richland campus of Dallas College. We don't have a date for that yet. As soon as we have that date, we'll provide that to the membership. This is a reminder that the TAS annual meeting is coming up October 6th through 8th in San Marcos. In the previous TAS, or in the last TAS newsletter, the summer issue was a second call for papers. So if you're interested in presenting at TAS, submit a 150-word abstract to the email address you see by August 18th, 2023. I know that a couple of folks in this room, including myself, are going to be presenting something at the meeting. So if you're interested in presenting, get those abstracts in. This also serves as a general reminder and call for papers for the 2023 volume of the NTAS Journal. Please contact Molly Hall for more information. Right at this moment, we have 3 journal articles. We'd love to double that. So if you're kind of on the fence and you've got something that you really have been thinking about publishing, but you're not quite sure, let's do it. Get it to us. Again, I've sent several emails about this already, but just to let you know, there are several outreach opportunities coming up, including Texas Can You Dig It, which is going to be in Gainesville at the end of September. If you're interested in participating in that, please contact me. There's the DAS Pioneer Heritage Festival, which will be held the same weekend as TAS annual meeting. So if you're not planning to attend the meeting and would like to help with some outreach, please contact Katrina Annuncio. And finally, Denton Dig It is the last Saturday in October. It's a hugely successful event for us. If you're interested in participating in that, please contact Lynn Sullivan. who is in the room waving at us right now. Thank you. And then finally, before we get to our guest speaker, I would like to point out that we are still in this bottom corner, partly sponsored by Humanities Texas. This is the second grant that we've received from Humanities Texas this year. Jimmy Barrera has spearheaded that. Gwen Durant has been helping immensely with the budgeting on that. So a big round of applause to them. It's twice this year we've received, which is wonderful. And with that, I'll present our July 2023 guest speaker, who will be talking about the Texas Calaboose, William Moore. I'm going to turn it. Let me put your palette up.
Will this go?
Yeah.
I want to go back.
Let me make sure that you're there. We go. All right, there you go.
Okay, can you hear me okay? This is my first talk in a room this nice and with amplification. It's always just been me talking, so this is new for me. I'm here to talk about calabooses in Texas. And the picture on here, the cover of my book, that's the one that started the whole project. I was with my friend Rhonda, and we were driving around town near where I live in Bryan College Station, and she wanted to see this house that she thought was haunted, and then she wanted to see the cemetery, and behind the main building was this little concrete building, and we had no idea what it was. And the local said, "Oh, that was our jail back in the 20s." And I was, well, it had bars in the windows, so I thought, well, maybe they're right. So I just started looking into it and finding more of these, and I got kind of carried away, and I drove over 20,000 miles documenting these things for quite a few years. So a calaboose, the word calaboose comes from the Mexican word, Spanish word calaboza. That was their word for jail. I'm sure they had other words, but that was a word. And then as Texas and other parts of the Southwest became more Anglo, they just, that word got changed to calaboose. So it just means jail. But when you look on maps, historic maps and other stuff, and when you see people giving it that name, it's always the little small buildings. It's never like, y'all are familiar with the Sanborn maps, I'm sure. So when you look at all the Sanborn maps for jails, and you see a county jail, it'll say jail. It'll never say calaboose. Now, when you get to little tiny buildings, they could say calaboose, they could say jail or lockup. Because you know, it's what I think. I wondered why they how they chose that, but I think maybe the people doing the mapping said, well, that's, to me, that's what it is, or the locals said that's what it is. I don't know. But for my definition, I had to have a definition in my book. So my definition is less than 300 square feet in one story. And that's pretty much it. And this one up here is around 100 square feet with no plumbing and no electricity or anything like that. So that was pretty common. So when I started doing this, I thought I had some kind of plan. I didn't want to just take pictures. And so I decided I want to document these before they're gone, because I had no idea, like this one here. I tried to buy it from the owner, but he said he'd only sell it to me if I move it, but I don't have the money to move it. So, but I wanted to protect it because it's sitting behind a grocery store and they burn trash in it. You know, so you see a lot of that kind of stuff. So I'm gonna go to this one here. Okay, y'all know where Frisco is, right down the road. This was their little jail or calaboose in Frisco. Now, that's made of poured concrete. And the method of pouring concrete didn't come into being until around 1908 or so in Texas. And so what they would do is make forms, pour the concrete in, then make another form, and pour, keep going till they got to the top. And then when they remove the forms, there will be horizontal lines, and you count how many times they poured the concrete. Well, when you pour concrete, it's kind of like making pottery. You have to have some kind of a temper, or it won't stay together. So normally people use rebar. Well, this one here has no rebar, because I saw it like this, and I saw it after it was collapsed. It had horseshoes, part of a metal bed frame, and just miscellaneous metal. And I think that's one reason it didn't hold up very well. So now this is the back of it. You can see how it's crumbling. And I actually had a picture of when the windows were a little higher than they are in this picture. It was starting to settle. And it was sitting in an empty lot in Frisco, surrounded by high real estate. And I couldn't imagine it was still there. And so the museum in Frisco decided, well, okay, we've got to get rid of it for safety reasons. So they built a replica. This is them tearing it down. I learned at the last minute they're going to tear it down, so I got there before they did that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have all lots of information. Okay, this is the replica, and the windows are on the wrong side, but it's at the museum, so that way you can see the windows from the street. But those are the original windows. That's a replica door, and that little red arrow is pointing to one of the horseshoes. But I give them credit for doing this, because they could have just trashed it. Okay, because this one was going to be gone, I did a site map for it. So now people know where it was, and also I got site numbers at Tarl for almost all the buildings. So they're all documented. And when I go to one of these calabooses, I don't just take pictures, I take lots of pictures. I measure the square feet, I measure the height, I measure all the windows, I measure, the distance between the windows and the doors, everything. I measure everything, and then create. The person who draws maps for my business we draw floor plans, because there's different floor plans with these things. So I wanted to document the variation. And let's see here. Okay, this is in Royce City, which is not far away. I think it's Rockwell County, right? Anyway, this is what it looked like when I went there. And you can see it sitting below ground level. So when it rained, that just filled up with water, and it went in there, and it was just eroding away the concrete. Kind of a magical thing happened. The lady of the Chamber of Commerce person, there's a guy in Royce City who has a huge concrete business. And he donated time and labor, and they got a bunch of money donated. And he spent a couple of years restoring this. He did a wonderful job. And there is if I can find a way to send it to your group, there's a video of him doing it, but I don't know how to send that by email. It's kind of big, but I'd be glad to. So that's what it looks like now. So he put this wall around it, and in the corner over here, there's a drain. So when it rains, it's not going to flood ever again. And these doors are new, but they're made out of old wood. And okay. This floor plan, there's a lot of them with 2 cells, but 2 cells side by side is the most common. So this would be floor plan 2A for me. So there's a wall in the middle dividing the 2 cells. And let's see. Okay, this is the Grapevine right down the road. I tried to show examples that's near here. Okay, and this is a really special one because you need to go see it, because it's right on the main street by the bus stop. It's really tiny. And one thing is, it's kind of hard to think about it for me sometimes. What would it be like if you were in this? Now, the door was barred, so there could be wind coming through the door, but those windows aren't going to give you very much wind, okay, air. And they had no beds. And so it could have been pretty cramped. So what I did, I should have brought a picture, but I built one in my yard out of wood, just for an example. And it doesn't fit any particular calaboose, but everything on mine is applicable somewhere, okay? And I did it for several reasons. One, I just wanted to do it. And two, I've been in it. And I wouldn't be in it today, not today, but I've been in it in the summer, in the winter, in the rain, and snow, when we had snow recently. And you don't want to be there. You just don't. And one of the things I do on my research is I read as many newspaper, I search for this newspaper.com thing for, you can search for words. When I search for Calaboose, and I probably read several hundred articles that had the word Calaboose somewhere. And some of the articles, they actually talk about so and so was in there last night and he was so hot he almost shriveled up or stuff like that. Or you don't want to be in there ever, or they talk about how bad they smell and whatever. Anyway, so the people in Grapevine did a great job because that's not where it was originally. They moved it here, but before they moved it, they had to do this kind of repair. And that's a picture of them doing the repairs. So, and it's right by the bus stop and it gets a lot of traffic. I highly recommend it. Okay. This is another two cell side by side. This is in Goree, which is Knox County. It's not that close. But I showed it because it's from the early 20s, but the brickwork is excellent. And it's so preserved. This is the best preserved I've seen out of brick. It's like they built it yesterday. And now you'll see the door has a little bit of window. And then the only windows for the cells are on the back, and they're usually centered on the cells, and they're about this big. So, you know, you just don't get any comfort. Well, yeah, you know, now this one is in Kent, which is let's see, Kaufman County. But the reason this is in here is because there's always these legends about Sam Houston slept here, George Washington slept here, whatever. And every time you go through in Texas, Oklahoma, Bonnie and Clyde were there, right? Well, Bonnie actually spent the night in this one. They got arrested. Clyde got away, but they caught her and this other guy. And she spent one night in there, and it's documented because the newspaper was there. It's got all kinds of photos of everything. So she really was there one night. So anyway, that's a good condition too. That's in a real small town. Real small town. Okay. This is in Leonard, which is not far from here. Leonard is in Fannin County. Now this one, when you see the door offset to the right or to the left, often that means when you walk in this door, the cell is on the left and part on the right will be just an empty area the sheriff could use, whatever. And that's true in this one. When you go in there to the left, there's a bunch of metal bars and everything, and the cell is over there. And this is it's got a date up there. It's been worked on and restored, but I don't know. You know, when I drive around and I see one of these, if I hadn't seen it before, it's very exciting to see one. Or it's kind of like if I know if I have a picture of it, it's kind of like you meet somebody on Facebook, but you hadn't met them in person yet. You know, so I get there and say, I really want to see that. And this is one of my favorites. Now this is in Petroleum, which is not far away. And the reason I included this one is because it, well, it shows you the door to the left, but the windows on the back, you can really see, barely see inside. So I don't really know what the inside was like, but the city modified it one time and used it for a city office. So, you know, it's not going to look like, you know, anything, but if you look down in the right corner, you'll see where the brick is missing. So there was two portions of brick. And when you see a brick house here, it's usually a brick is like a facade, it's just to cover the frame. But these had to have at least two portions of brick so they wouldn't, you know, it'd stand up. And this is one of them that had a name on a brick. I don't remember the name though. But if you're driving down the street, unless you're looking for something, you wouldn't think of it as a jail. I mean, I wouldn't. Nowadays, anytime I see anything like that, I wonder, you know. But no, that was one. And the brick ones always have a concrete roof most of the time. Okay. This is up in Ringgold, Texas, in Montague County, right almost on the river. And the reason this is in here That's a very small town, like a lot of them. But this is after all the brush had been cleared away. The guy that told me about it was a resident of there, and he had no idea it was there until somebody started clearing brush. No, half the people in town didn't know that, you couldn't see it from the road, and nobody's gonna walk over there. And this is a really old one, and it's in fair condition. But it's just kind of neat to see it, because that's where the town used to be. You know, there's nothing there now but that. And it's still there. Okay, this is this is in Tioga, which is, I think, Grayson County. Is not too far north from here. And I try to get, when I read the newspapers and talk, I try to talk to people who remember some of these jails, and sometimes I get lucky. And I love anecdotes about these things. And so this one, you can't see it because the tree's in the way, but the brick is in really bad shape in that corner. And at one time, what they told me is the brick was just kind of falling out. And they had a guy who, when he drank a lot, put him in there. The next morning, when he sobered up, he'd crawl out and go off. You know, now, that's believable. I mean, I don't know. But there's a lot of stories about break escapes and stuff like that. And one of the big problems is in the wooden ones, and there's not a lot of wooden ones still standing. In the wooden ones, prisoners will sometimes set their bedding on fire to try to get at, so they have to put the fire out and let them out. And sometimes they didn't get out in time. There's a bunch of stories like that. Okay, this is in Pilot Point, which is not too far away. And when you walk through the door, there's bars in the back. This is on city property, behind fences, so you have to get permission to go in there. This is the last of the slide. So I find these by newspaper articles, sandboard maps, websites, Facebook pages, all that kind of stuff. And drive it around accidentally. And I found quite a few of that just driving through the town. I didn't know there was going to be one there. But one of the things I encounter the most, and the example is one in East Texas. I don't remember the name. There's a little brick calaboose. The door is all metal bars. It has 3 windows and they all have bars. It's sitting by the water tower behind a fence. So you can't get in without permission from the city. So I don't remember where I saw the picture. So I called the city. It's really a tiny town. I called up there and talked to the county clerk, I think it was. And I said, I'm doing this book on jails in Texas, and I'd like to come see the one in your town, but I need permission to, get on the property. And her response was, well, there's no jail in this town. Well, I understand that, but there was, and so they quite often get that confused, like, or I'll say, I want to see the jail, and they'll say, well, it's over here. No, not the new one, Anyway, so she finally said, well, where is this jail you're talking about? And I said, it's over there. It's just like a block or two from her building. And she said, oh, no, that's our storage building. That's not jail. Well, it was a jail. And it's full of stuff, so they're using it for storage, okay? And then there's another East Texas town. There's a little, I think it's brick, Calaboose, right behind Chamber of Commerce, okay? And the door had been replaced and just a wooden plywood stuff. So from the front, you wouldn't know anything. And on the side, it had bars, but they put this dark colored plexiglass over them, I guess, to keep the light out or what rain out or whatever. And you really couldn't see the bars. It's right behind the Chamber of Commerce. You walk out the back door and there it is, and they didn't know it was there. And they're just thrilled that they know that, So I get a lot of that. And of course, there's all kinds of stories about, famous people doing this and that and everything. And one thing people will tell you is that they were only for drunks, Now, it's true for basically everything I've seen that people who were locked up was mostly for being drunk or rowdy behavior. That was to be the biggest group. But there were some big criminals in there too, like bought into Parker and some others. But I have seen newspaper articles talking about people being locked up for all kinds of things. There was, in one town, there was a couple in a cafe, and they had a little puppy. And they were fighting over the name of the puppy. And they got so out of hand, they locked them up in the calaboose. So that's not a regular crime, you know? And you know, people do all kinds of things. One of my favorite stories, this is in Oklahoma. I'm doing a sequel for Oklahoma. There was a wooden calaboose right next to the railroad track. And the train passed through, it wouldn't stop there. And the people in the town didn't like that because they wanted to be able to get on the train. So the relationship between the sheriff in the town and the railroad was not very good. So anytime the judge was out of town and he could arrest a conductor or anything like that, he would, because they didn't like each other. Okay, so he had two people in the jail one day. It was flimsy wood, so they just kicked the door and got out. So they built a new one, and they said, okay, the quote says something like, "You're never gonna get out of this one." And it had one window up high, about that big. No, you couldn't physically crawl through it. It said, "Nobody's gonna get out of this one." So they arrest two more people. See, the train stopped in the next town. So they would have to go by wagon or something, maybe 10 miles to get on the train. So they arrest two more people, and then they were railroad guys. So they knew when the next trains were coming and all that. It was right there. So when the next train came and stopped, one of them whistled a lot, real loud, and the guys heard it, and they may have recognized the whistle. I don't know about that, but they came over and they said, "Well, what's going on?" He said, "We need to get out of here." So what they did, this is a really good story. They took the train back to where they came from, and they got a flat car with a crane, pulled up. They lifted the jail onto the car and with them in it, and drove it away. Yeah, and I think I forget where they took it to, but what one of the guys lived in that town, and the newspaper said something like, so and so has a new addition to his house, but it's funny because it has bars on one of the windows. So he takes that little tiny wooden or whatever it was made of and added onto his house. And then it was such an embarrassment that a lot of people in town left town because the rivalry was so. They finally resolved it, and the train started stopping there, I believe. So now the materials they're made out of would be wood, concrete, brick, stone. I guess that's all I can think of right now. I never saw Adobe. And the concrete started in the early 1900s, but when a town was just starting out, they didn't. This is especially true in Oklahoma, because Oklahoma, they didn't become a state until 1907, and they had all that land rush and that sort of stuff. So the early ones would have been wood, most of the time, because wood was easier to get. You could either get it locally or you could come on the train. And after the towns got established, a lot of them started making bricks, you know, and then they get concrete. And when I started this project, I thought maybe there would be some kind of a pattern, like all the ones in East Texas would be wood, and all the ones in Hill Country would be rock, but that's not true. Concrete is by far the most common. And let's see, okay, plumbing. Very few, some had a toilet, because it's not a real nice one, and that's about it. I haven't found any that had electricity. If it was, it's added later maybe. And some had beds, a bed that would just stand alone. Well, I've seen very few of those that are still original. And then some, especially they had these metal cages, and these metal cages were made by several companies, one in St. Louis. And they would put their little plate on there, said who made it and everything. Well, they could send off of those cages. You could order them out of a catalog, and you could pick one of their models, or you could customize it. And they talk about how they would build them and everything, and put them together, take them apart, ship them down, and the blacksmith to put it together or whatever. And they were, I guess, they were pretty expensive. I'm not sure, but most people, when I see a cage sitting out in the open, they say, oh, that's where the jail was. Well, I have found no evidence of a metal cage ever being used outside. But they were used inside. For example, one of the jails, some of the jails you go to, they'll have a metal cage, and there's no way it goes through that door. You can take it apart, it wouldn't go through the door. So they built around it. They take the cage and put it either on the ground or foundation and then build around it. And I learned that from documents. And some of the metal cages often would have bunk beds. They'd be on each side, and they would fold up and fold down, this sort of thing. And that's one of the options. And one of them had a metal toilet was an option, but I've only seen one of those. But those metal cages are really, really well built, and I think they're extremely interesting. And the company that made a lot of it is Pauly out of St. Louis. And Jay Pauly was a German immigrant, and he invented this locking system where you could pull a lever and several doors are open. He did a lot of that stuff. And so, I have a picture of one down in South Texas that has a metal box on the outside, and it says J. Pauly patent, so and so and everything. And another thing, it's hard to get dates or when they were built. That's real. It's kind of like somebody asking you, how old is an arrowhead or something? You almost never know. People will tell you things, but very rarely can I have all this on spreadsheets, so I can sort it and do that kind of stuff, say how many I have known dates for. But sometimes there'll be a date scratched in it or something, or sometimes you find a newspaper article. But people like to talk about them being really old, much older than they really are. So, but to me, the most important thing, one of the important things about this studying this stuff, I'm kind of addicted to it now, is that it represents a period of jail architecture that will never be repeated. There were jails as far back as you can think, okay, but these little calabooses, at least the ones that are still around, they generally date from the late 1890s or 1900. But so the little towns would have them, and let's say they arrest a really bad person, and say it's winter time in 1900. Well, they don't have roads, they don't have cars, and the county jail is maybe 20, 30, 40 miles away. Nobody's going to come get that prisoner. So that was the holding place for those, or just to get people off the street. But in the 30s, when the farm to market act passed, and they started building roads so farmers could get their produce to the markets, and the cars were better, they quit building these. The last date I have for one is in the 40s. And now they did exist sometimes on the same time as the county jail. I'm not sure why, although some of these cases why they were coexisted, but sometimes when you look at these sandboard maps, if you're lucky to get enough dates, you can follow the sequence. You can say, okay, here's a wooden calaboose, and then over here they're building the county jail. They'll say it construction, and then so they're using it till then, So anyway, I think I'm out of time. You have any questions? Yes, sir.
My question, Bill, is that a 2-cell calaboose?
No, one cell.
One cell.
You go through the door, and there's bars in the middle door, and one cell. And it's not very roomy.
Did they add something to it? Is that what that
No,
is?
that's something the city did.
Okay,
Just that little building there that on the left, that's it.
the actual count.
Yeah. Yes,
Answered one of my questions.
okay.
Was the date range. I had a question about that. Also, as far as now I know you're working in Texas, and it sounds like you said you're now looking at Oklahoma.
Yes.
But from general research, how widespread was this kind of architecture? The idea
It's everywhere.
was.
Yeah. I have found jails called calabooses up all over. I have pictures. I think about 20-something states that would have a calaboose, and they've used that term. So I never took linguistics, but words travel. And I'm kind of amazed sometimes at how could that word travel so far in that amount of time? But they're up in the Minnesota and Southern area up there, where the French were, there's a French word that was translated into calaboose from French. So that could be one of the reasons. But anyway.
Any other questions in the room? Any questions on the Zoom?
Yes.
So they brought their meals to?
Yes, when they had them, I guess. I found a couple of newspaper articles about food, like one gave their menu, that's pretty rare. And then there were some articles about how much they paid the person to bring the food. So now they would bring food in. If you just spent one night, I don't know what they did. I don't have enough information on that. But they did this over in Waco, they put a fence around theirs, so people were passing stuff through the window. And then I started thinking about that. A lot of these bars are so wide that you can put a gun through there, you know, and I don't know if that really happened or not. But now people did bring out in West Texas, a town called Best, which is out in the middle of nowhere. It's in over by Big Lake. There's a little concrete calaboose, and that's all that's left of the town. It's really hard to find and get to. But I have an article from a newspaper of a lady who lived in town, and she would bring them cold water to drink. And sometimes prisoners would yell and scream, you know, we want this, want that. And there's a lot of articles about we don't want it in this part of town. Or would you move it because it's too noisy, or they're cursing, or this or that, you know? And some were actually way far out of town.
Well, related to that, we got a question on Zoom.
Oh.
Bill, how many of these do you know about, and where were they generally located in town?
I think my book has around 80 something. That's what I seem to remember. I don't remember the count. Where they were located is something I thought was important to try to establish. And there appears to be no reason, no special place. You find a lot of them by city water towers. And I wondered why. And then my idea is this, that they had the city owned this lot. And that may be the only lot they had available. And they had the water tower there. Maybe one came before the other, I don't know. So I just think they made use of the lot. You find a lot of them in alleys. And I think that's because they don't want to be visible. You find some by railroad tracks, but I have not found any pattern really. They can be anywhere. I brought a few copies of my book if anybody's interested. This is not a sales pitch for me because I got them at the author's discount at A&M. So if anybody wants one, you get it at my discount, which is $10 less and no tax if you bought it from A&M. So I have 5 of those if anybody's interested.
Okay, do we have any more questions in the room or on Zoom?
No more questions on Zoom.
Okay.
Okay, great. Well, thanks. And thank you all for braving another 110-degree day to join us this evening. And with that, at 7:39, I'll bring the July 13th meeting of the North Texas Archaeological Society to a close. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
I just want to say this was a really interesting call, and if there's another meeting, I would love to join it. I'm a student at UTA right now, and I really loved it. So shout out to my professor that invited me out, but this was great. Thank you all. Have a nice evening.
Thanks, Lindsay.
$25.
Y'all have a good night.
So I just thought I'd bring some.
I don't have.
I think I'm good. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.